The true cost of your system doesn't show up on day one. It shows up years later when you need support through operational upgrades, turnover, and the long timelines of aviation demands. Hi, I'm Patrick Kraus, host of the Nose to Tail podcast. Today, Todd Meredith takes us behind the scenes of aerospace testing and why building versus buying is less about cost and more about sustainment. Let's get into it. You know, what is it that got you into the test equipment manufacturing business? What channel does someone take to land in this role?
Well, I was outside of college, so was working in the plastics industry, and then realized that plastics was going nowhere. I was in Ohio and was like, oh crap, I got a wife that's pregnant, so I got a child coming along the way, and kind of was interested, was working at the time, it was called Avtron Aerospace, which became Testek. So that kind of led me into it. And, neat big pieces of equipment that all electronic, electrical, the geek in me loved it. So it was like, okay, this kind of led me to this. And I've been with the company for 24 years now. So
that's great.
Was inside, then pushed me outside. So, we were talking about Japanese beer. That was my first territory, was Japan. Wow. So was helping out all Nippon Airways and Japan Airlines, which we still do help out. But that's what got me into it. And, like many in the industry, you kind of get hooked to aviation a little bit, and then it gets its grip on you. That you're like,
it's a bit like a virus.
It is, that you kind of don't exit it.
Yeah. So, well, that's good. So what type of support equipment early in your career when you had Japan as a territory? What types of items were you helping them with?
So you brought up the ATEC 5, ATEC 6. So they would do, we make a similar type tester, and typically for high power. So an ATEC would be like RF or, some type of engine control, where we're handling generator control. We're handling like audio control boxes. So that's kind of the stuff that we were helping them out with. And then also in power generation. So that was also my role. And then it expanded into China, and like you brought up Malaysia. Malaysia was included, Singapore. And then later on in my career, I was brought back in to handle U.S. customers. And then since 2019, I've been leading the sales team.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, in the Japanese marketplace, did they, like Malaysia, I'll give you the example. Malaysia was pretty self-sufficient. They had a lot of variety of different capabilities to be as self-sustained as they could. Was it the same mindset in Japan, or did they approach it differently?
No, very same mindset. So the goal was that, there's always a balance. So it's how many aircraft spares do I carry versus what in-house repair do I have? And the ROI on it is just that, of understanding, okay, what's my LRU back shelf versus, okay, I'm going to bring in some type of organic repair. And then they also calculate in travel time. If it's going to take a day or two for a part to come back and forth, starts making sense of saying, okay, I'm going to actually build up that back shop. I'm going to have the repair capability, and then the type of test equipment that I deal with is just a small fraction of it. There's other assembly tooling, disassembly tooling, balancing equipment that go into it. So we're just kind of like that small part. And then they'll go to the OEM, or they'll go to a third party to receive training on it. And then they'll do some type of certification program. So, it's to us and to myself, you think, okay, this whole test stand's my whole world. But we really are just like a very small part of the whole aviation scheme.
I think people maybe would enjoy a conversation about when you test something in the modern test systems, it's beyond just a test, right? It's a full evaluation of the unit. Maybe describe for us a common unit that is tested, and how long does that test take? And then what kind of results is someone looking at? Like, what are they looking at when they get those results from the system?
Yeah. So one of the popular things we do is generators. So an IDG or a CSD. So it's going to either come off an aircraft because it's suspected damage, or it is. So once it goes into receiving, they'll put it on a test bench, and then they'll run it. Typically, that type of run is 45 minutes to an hour. and then they're just checking the perimeters of it. That will tell them if there's something good. So it'll be a no fault found, back to the aircraft it goes, or is it there's something damaged on it. And then the test stands are fully automatic. So you're going to receive from that test report, it's going to tell you what perimeters aren't in key. It's going to go out to a workshop where they're going to tear it down, repair it, rebuild it. And then once it's ready for test again, it goes back to the same test bench again. That is what is going to be used to say, okay, it's meeting those perimeters. So any of the OEMs out there, they will make a manual, component maintenance manual, or in the military, they call them TOs or DMORs. That is the governing document that will say, okay, this is how it's tested. And then these are the perimeters it has to meet. And then what they'll do from that, the test bench will automate that, make sure that it's actually testing to that, and then send it back out once it's good.
So you guys do avionics test equipment, right?
We do.
So if there's a computer and it's got a bunch of cards inside of it, your system actually identifies which card is faulty.
Correct.
Is it a repair and replace concept, or is it a, hey, I'm going to pull that card out and I'm actually going to fix the card?
Both. So the terminology for that is LRU or SRU, line replaceable unit or shop replaceable. So it depends on the component itself. It's, some of them will say line replaceable, so they'll identify what card it is. And that'll get pulled out, put back in, or it'll be a shop replaceable unit, so it'll identify area of the circuit or the component that actually needs to be replaced. A lot of that comes down to what the original manufacturer actually provides. So if they don't provide enough information, then it becomes like a section or an area where some of even the earlier instructions were very good. It would actually be able to provide it down to a shop level where you could actually replace the component.
So when you got into this business in the early 2000s, if you had a legacy aircraft, even ones that are still flying today, like the 757, what's been probably the biggest shift? I'm sure the first 757 test equipment, we are still working on fax machines.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it wasn't giving you a digital readout, giving you exact thing. What was it like switching from that analog into the digital age and in that transformation in the industry?
Yeah. Well, I love to say in aviation, we're always lacking, because there's redundancy, there's reliability. So even back then in the 757, that was still technology that was probably 10 or 15 years older than what the most modern was. So they were releasing stuff on tape. They were releasing on diskettes. So we'll still have where people have to load flight software and they're still going back to the OEM getting floppy disks. And then that becomes, hearing from the friends in the industry, where the heck do I get floppy disks from? And
eBay.
Yeah. And you joke, but, a lot of people tell me that eBay is their number one source for aircraft, repair type stuff, like for test stands of fixing them. So, yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So as we've transitioned from generation to generation, do you guys typically pull along? So, for example, if you had a flight management computer and you had whatever mechanism was to test that, and you have a new generation of test equipment, do you guys pull along that older capability into the newer equipment?
You do, because there's always people there. That's their bread and butter. So like 73, A320, it has to always kind of follow along and then bring along into it. And then, with all the new technology out there, a lot of times you have to actually degrade the computer speed and stuff like that so that you're not over testing something that is not used to being that. For example, we just got done doing a project for the B-52. So and that came to us on tape reel. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So you have slow mode.
You do.
Can I say, we're put it in slow motion
mode. And then when you got to test a 7/8, then we could bring it back to something more modern.
That's funny.
Yeah.
From an operator standpoint, so you think about Japan Airlines or All Nippon, and they're trying to they have a fairly broad spectrum of generational aircraft.
They do.
Is there an approach that you guys take as you service them as an account, right? I mean, you can say, oh, here's the latest and greatest every year, or do you guys have, It's not an iPhone, right? Because they just make it obsolete for you.
Yeah.
But maybe you've got something to say, hey, we can actually upgrade that old piece and we can keep that old test equipment running. So you're constantly doing that
Yeah.
versus replacing.
Yeah.
What do you think that generational leap is? Is it 7 to 10 years? Is it, how do you guys approach that?
So on the mechanical hardware, life of a test bench is going to be 30 years.
Wow.
It's a lot of metal, it's even in the avionics stuff, like you'll go around workshops, you'll still see Tech 5s, you'll see irises that have been out of, production for 30 years that people are still keeping in business. You'll see typically about every 10 years, a computer type upgrade where, the Windows XP is becoming obsolete. So I'm going to take it to Windows 7 or Windows 10 or Windows 11. So in our industry of test equipment, you'll see a couple minor upgrades and then typically a major. But yeah, it's in our industry because you're repairing aircraft parts to replace a test stand. They'll just repair it.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, I could fix that component. I could also fix the machine that actually tests it.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So for all of our listeners out there, just so you know the process we go to in the nose to tail, we typically have sort of a questionnaire to kind of get a sense of your industry and some things that are important to you and ask some questions and you guys give some feedback. And Todd, you have currently set the record for the most number of pages of responses at 12. I
Nice.
compliment you on your dedication to your craft. And in there, there was a word, the word COTS, C-O-T-S.
Correct.
And as I was reading through the notes on there, I could not make heads or tails of what that means. Maybe you could enlighten me and give me a little education.
Commercial off the shelf.
Okay. So what are we referencing in the test equipment world when it's COTS?
Okay. So that means that you're getting a component that is third-party made. So you're going to use a Dell computer. You're going to use a National Instruments data acquisition card. You're going to use a TDK power support. So these that are items that we don't necessarily make, homemade. These are items that you could go to Grainger, you could go like the eBay and say, okay, I'm going to find this. It's very important in this industry because companies come, companies go. We're very lucky. We've been in business since 1969. But for anybody that's actually evaluating the test stand and thinking, okay, I'm going to use it for 30 years, it's important for me to know that I could support it. And it's something like a name brand component that's in there. So many companies that we deal with, when they write the specifications, that's like one of the biggest things that they say has to be done is that it has to be something commercial off the shelf. So if you don't have it in stock, I could go somewhere else to actually get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's very true. I've often heard as I've talked to MROs and even internally, sometimes I've got a technician that currently works for me. He's a bit of a mad genius. He goes, I can build that. Yeah. And I go, oh, okay. I'm not sure what that means. He's got a lot of confidence, so I don't want to overly question him. I said, or do we just go buy one?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, and I said, okay. I said, let's at least price out what we're going to look at buying before we make some, if we're repairing a $100,000 part and it's a test bench is reasonably priced, I think on the risk of being zero to buy a new one versus him creating one in the shop would be okay. So when we talk about that, I'm sure you've heard that before. What's your response as a test supplier that's what you guys do for a living?
Yeah. It's the perpetual make buy approach is what we call it. And it's, one of the biggest concerns when you're going either make or buy is that, that dependability of the person. Let's say that our friend George, who's making you the test bench, next week he wins the lottery or next week he gets a new girlfriend. And then all of a sudden, where you're located isn't so popular anymore. Or, he moves to, South Florida and is living the life. Now you're stuck with a piece of equipment that, okay, I don't have documentation on. I don't have a manual for the software. I don't even know what the software he wrote it in. How do I support it? And we do come across that from time to time where, the mad genius made it and did a beautiful job. But, oh, crud, we don't know why he picked that component or why it uses it or what the measurement is or how are we going to integrate it when we need to get something else. So the biggest pitch for buying a commercial type test stand is that you're buying that. You're buying the support network, but you're also buying a bill of material, you're buying a drawing set, you're buying all that stuff that is needed. And then, most of us test equipment companies, we're full of mad genius type engineers that typically we don't like bringing to a show like this because they're kind of, they're the non-social. So being able to actually provide that source of information, having them document it, but then they've seen a ton of stuff. So if you come to us and say, okay, I want to test this A320 or 737, we'll talk like, okay, probably in 10, 15 years, you're going to probably do 787. So let's set up the base machine now that you could handle 787 or A350, handle the next generation. And then in the future, buy the specific part that you need to test it, because it's a big piece of capital equipment. You want to have some type of, ROI on it. So the more that you could test on it, the better. So coming to a commercial type test equipment company and having that conversation of, okay, this is my small piece of the world, but you've seen so much. What can we do? We have those conversations all the time, and then just try to help work with them of, okay, this is kind of the what you do need, and then versus the what you kind of want, and then give them the right piece of equipment.
So a little bit of history for Jetman West perspective. So we took over the old TWA American Airlines overhaul base in Kansas City in 2010. And as part of that takeover, there was big liquidation auction of all the old equipment and test. I mean, it was some stuff that is 20 years older than me, some of it, and for some great things, there were some the equipment in there, machine shop equipment that I was like, wow, and they were like, this is the best stuff. We got to buy it. And I go, why? And I go, it looks terrible. And they're like, it'll work forever.
Yeah.
It's infinite. This is stuff that they made was made in the 50s. This is going to last forever.
Yeah.
Anyway, one of the things that we came across were these just piles of TWA fabricated test equipment, all kinds of test equipment. And I'm like, what is this stuff? And only the guys from TWA even knew what it was. And there were some guys still kind of kicking around back in 2010. And I'm like, what is this stuff? Like, how do you even certify a part? They're like, well, we were the airline. We could do whatever we want. Do you guys ever get that? Do you ever get those airlines that are like, oh no, we can just do this? I think a legacy airline today would be foolish not to just be elite with all of their equipment, right? Reliability and to your point on the ROI. But when you're looking at a small airline that was 100% in struggle on the verge of bankruptcy their entire careers at TWA, they were building a lot on their own. Yeah. Do you guys run into that around the world where you've got some of those smaller guys just trying to handle everything they can in-house?
Oh, of course. And it's some of the stuff, simpler items like oxygen bottles, things like that. It actually makes sense, where it's a regulator. There's a few small parts, but yeah, we've ran into homemade fill-in-the-blank type test stands where, they'll make them. And with a lot of these workshops, it's kind of like a progression. So we'll see the kind of self-made hydraulic testing. It's flow, pressure, temperature. It works. And then all of a sudden the guy's like, okay, now I'm going to add to something else. So it's like graduating. Like when we're 16, driving the frickin' beater, a little escort's okay. And then now I've got a real job and I'm going to step up to, a real truck or something like that. We see that progression as well, and it's neat seeing the industry grow in that. And, where these are small workshops that it's a family ran and then they're growing and then acquiring more stuff. And then you kind of realize you're part of the family. You're helping out as they're kind of growing and they're making money off it. And then they're coming back to you saying, okay, that made me some good money. Now let's go add something else on. So
nice. So Testek's been around for a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah.
1969. That's a magnificent journey. What's next on the horizon? What great technology is going to light up the marketplace in the next handful of years?
Well, the most activity we're getting right now is 787. So there's more 787 aircraft coming off of warranty. And 787 is an electric aircraft. So there's a lot of new technology on it that Right now, a lot of the airlines are chasing us on it. But I would say probably in the next 5, 10 years, we're going to start seeing more of the independents coming out saying, okay, we're going to start doing repair on those things. So, the pneumatics are different on a 787. The hydraulics are different. The power generation's different. On a 787, the aircraft produces almost 1 megawatt of power,
Wow.
where like on a 777, it produces like a fifth of that. So the 787 was a quantum leap. And what we're noticing is, test equipment doesn't change right away with it. It's once the aircraft's out of warranty and then you get enough out there that some independent shops are going to say, okay, I'm interested in that.
Well, that's amazing. I didn't know that about the 787. I'm a big 777 guy, and it's been a big hallmark for our organization. But
Yeah.
so I'd love the marketplace, someone out there who wants to park 4 or 5 of them. I'm happy to take those on consignment, and I'll do a nice thin deal so you can make lots of money. But I'd love to get my hands on them because I think I'm amazed with that airplane in all of that, what it is.
Yeah.
So, as your company is growing, and now you're in charge of global sales.
Correct.
So how did you guys, previously being in having some regions, or do you guys have like a European office and in Southeast Asia? How did you guys break up your organization to best service the marketplace?
Well, it's both service and sales. So we have localized service in Southeast Asia, both in Japan and in China. We have localized service in the Netherlands and then also in Jordan. So it tied typically to that, you'll have sales organizations as well that work within that. And then we've got people throughout the whole U.S. that are out servicing, and then the sales team, drumming up the business, walking the road type stuff, being the road warriors. So.
Well, that's good. Do you guys see any particular region that is a growth for you?
Right now, it's Eastern Europe is becoming quite a growth area. And enjoy this show. It's European or Eastern European counterpart called the beer.
Right.
We're seeing growth in Poland, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, that region where you're seeing growth not only in the commercial section, but also military, where they're building up on military aircraft support.
Yeah. We've noticed, obviously, in the last couple of decades, there's been a nice steady growth of aviation talent in Eastern Europe. And I think part of it as well is you're still in Europe, but but the cost of doing business there is beneficial in the Eastern Europe versus North Central or Western Europe. So I can see where just the acquisition cost of your labor hours, and you're selling those hours. So from a component shop side of the house, it's pretty impactful. So I can see why that has developed, and they've been wise to approach it the way that they have, in my opinion. Certainly, we all hope that the global conflicts slow down so that we can all kind of get back to a little bit of normalcy in our worlds.
Yeah.
And I think that would be good for that region as well if that was able to happen. So curious, you mentioned military a couple of times, and that's obviously something you're working on. What percentage of your business do you think it fluctuates from the military to the civilian side?
We're almost half-half, where half of our stuff is military, half of our stuff is commercial. And many of the components that are tested on our machines are dual purpose. So the generator test stands could do both military and commercial. Pneumatic benches could do both military and commercial. Similar technology for hydraulics, they use different oils. But other than that, very similar technologies. So, as we go out and have our line card of capability, there's a lot of technology crossover between both military and commercial.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And I'm curious as well, as we're talking, how does the training work, right? Because you get a piece of test equipment in. I remember going through, I think it was KLM shop in Amsterdam, and they had their IDG test benches set up, and the guys are in there running very sophisticated test bench rooms. I was floored.
Yeah.
I had not seen a facility quite like that before. How do you support your customers with the training side of the house?
Sure. So we could use KLM as an example. So those generator test stands are ours. As you're going through looking.
So no wonder they look so good.
Yeah, exactly. And then the double bonus is that we have people in the Netherlands. So we do have a large support contract with KLM where we have people on site that actually do help. So let's take any type of customer. When they go receive a machine, right, even before they receive it, they'll send us generators. And our facility has all the power, water, everything that we need. We test them out in our facility, and then they come do a pre-acceptance. So they'll come to Michigan, they'll do test out of it, they will do troubleshooting. They will do, okay, how do I calibrate this? What would be something that actually gets damaged or hurt on it? And then from there, they'll, do all the running of the units, and then it'll get packed up. Typically, they'll do ocean freight. It'll sail the ocean, come back. They install it, and then our technicians come over and do the same thing again. So there's a lot of hands-on training, but there's also a large documentation package that comes because, good or bad, employees do change. They get promoted. They get other opportunities. So you do need that reference documentation that, okay, I could actually read what the machine is doing.
Is that support structure one of the keys to the success of the organization?
Has to be, So, this is an industry where AOG is lethal. So you have to have that type of support organization. You have to have it professionally ran. We use a CRM Salesforce that actually manages that portion of our service as well. So that, the service team realizes what's open. We carry a huge amount of spare parts as well. So, yeah, uptime is critical for our industry.
Absolutely. From a parts guy, I totally understand. And I wish I had the capability to understand sometimes the airplanes as well as you probably do your own equipment, right? You know exactly what's breaking on a day-to-day basis. And that's why you guys have inventory. So that's great support structure for those folks. Well, all of my guests on the podcast, I always ask them what their favorite aircraft is and why. Mm-hmm. So I'd be curious what your favorite aircraft is.
Oh, it's the 787 by far. Because I kind of cut my teeth in the industry of supporting some of the initial ANAs to JALs to, Singapore Airlines. Just being able to see that from development to launch to now that it's living its legacy, absolutely love it. And then flown it multiple times over the Pacific and also the Atlantic. So you do gain appreciation when you're sitting 15 hours.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, both those airlines in Japan have fantastic services and sky clubs, and they really do it well. They understand aviation. Well, listen, we're going to wrap things up. Is there anything else maybe you want to talk about or you can enlighten the listeners and those watching us about either test equipment or maybe just the marketplace in general?
Yeah. So, I do appreciate this opportunity, and it is a great industry. You see so many of these workshops that are growing and all of the talent and capabilities. So we would not be that without the talent in those workshops. So as you referred to the mad scientists that, are disassembly, reassembling these parts, the workmanship, if you've ever seen a IDG taken apart, it put a Swiss watch to shame.
Yeah.
And there's many workshops that we've dealt with. One comes to mind, like Summit Aerospace, and just the organization and the tooling that they have, and just the ability that they have of putting generators through. If you haven't had the opportunity, it's a true work of art, and it makes you really do appreciate. Even you would consider, okay, it's just a minor part of the industry, but it's like how critical it is for the sustainment.
Yeah. Well, Todd, I appreciate you being on today.
Yeah.
For all our listeners out there, I hope you learned a little bit about test equipment. I know I learned a little bit, and I'm excited to see what comes next with the 787s.
Yep.
And for all of you out there, please be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Nose to Tail. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Presented by Jet Midwest.